Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Thank you for attending today's webinar, How AI Accelerates Clinical and Drug Development Timelines, presented by Dr. Vince Clinical Research. I'm Heath Clendenning with Fierce Life Sciences, and I'll be moderating this webinar. Just a few notes before we begin. You can access closed captions from the bottom right corner of the video player. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to watch on demand within 24 hours. We want to hear from you during this presentation. Please do submit any questions you have using the Questions and Answers tab on the left side of your screen. Time permitting, we will conclude with a Q&A session. I'd like to start off by introducing today's outstanding speakers. Tony Cardozo, who is the Manager of Statistical Programming at Dr. Vince Clinical Research. Dr. Todd Rudo, who is the Executive Vice President and Chief Medical Officer of Clario. Beth Williams, the Executive Director at Clinical Trial Services, Dr. Vince Clinical Research. And Dr. Vishwa Kalaru, Founder and CEO for Enveda Biosciences. To help set the stage first, I'd like to first introduce Dr. Bradley Vince. Brad?
Thank you, Heath. And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brad Vince. I'm the CEO and Chief Medical Officer of Dr. Vince Clinical Research. I want to thank you all for joining our webinar today on the application of artificial intelligence in clinical research. Most importantly, I'd like to personally thank our 4 esteemed speakers for sharing their expertise on how AI is currently being deployed in our industry. I want to further thank both Enveda Biosciences and Clario for their significant support with this webinar. Now, the use of artificial intelligence in drug development and clinical research is clearly a hot topic right now. There is a strong desire within the biopharmaceutical industry to understand its practical applications, how we can best leverage the various AI systems to accelerate timelines, and how these advancements can take our industry in new directions. Today, our speakers will delve into not only the practical applications of generative and large language model AI, but also advanced initiatives aimed at improving quality, enhancing efficiency, and most importantly, expediting deliverables in order to hit key corporate milestones. Thank you, and now back to you, Heath.
Let's begin our presentations today with you, Tony.
Thank you, Heath. My name is Tony Cardozo. I'm the Manager of Statistical Programming at Dr. Vince Clinical Research, and today we'll be talking about the accelerating clinical and drug development timelines with AI. All right, so we'll start with expediting and automating key deliverables in clinical research. So as a quick introduction, we're going to talk about the use of AI in expediting data tabulation and analysis. So this would be leveraging AI within the biostatistics and statistical programming space. The potential of AI is AI can significantly streamline data tabulation and analysis in clinical trials. So that is the full spectrum of generating STM, ATOM, and TLFs. And that can be from basic to advanced applications. So AI applications can range from generating simple code in like a chatbot type environment to prompts, or from user prompts to fully automated complex processes that fully automate an overall process. Enhancing efficiency, AI could reduce manual efforts and accelerate timelines by automating both routine and complex tasks. And adapting to industry standards, as we train our AI models to be able to adhere to industry standards like CDISC, we will be confident that we're having outputs that are compliant with industry standards, reducing the overall time effects of becoming compliant. So within this talk, we're going to talk from a high level on the AI tools from basic language models like ChatGPT, Grok, Lambda, a bunch of other ones that are out there, to a more sophisticated multi-agent system that can be used to automate key deliverables in clinical research. So at the start, we'll start with the prompt-driven creation with AI. So this would be the simplest application. This would be leveraging platforms like ChatGPT or Lambda or Grok to be able to produce code snippets and create content relative to whatever the user prompts. So it's a simple and quick output. So the user will prompt the description of what it wants as the output. The LLM will process that and provide the direct answer back to the user. A simple application example would be, let's say you have an associate, an early programmer, somebody that's within the first couple of years, and they don't know how to do some things, or they don't know the syntax for certain programming. Let's say they want to produce a sort that removes all the duplicates and also outputs the duplicates into a separate data set, they'd be able to prompt the LLM with their specifications of what they need, name the name of the data set that they require, and then the LLM itself will produce all the code for them. They'd be able to paste that directly into their program and go on with it. So the benefits of prompt-driven creation is that this approach saves time on routine coding tasks and can serve as a quick reference. So even a senior and principal programmer, if they don't know certain syntax or whatever, like the example that I have down below, it's a simple question of asking what the SAS function is to check if a line name already exists, and it will produce back the system func that you'd be able to use to do that. The limitations of prompt-driven creation is that while it's efficient with simple tasks, the accuracy and reliability may decrease with more complex and highly specialized code requirements. So if it's something that's data-driven or context-driven, it'll have limitations on that just because it's only based on exactly what the user is providing for it. One step beyond prompt-driven creation is the use of being able to provide the LLM with certain additional items of context and for the generation of the output. So enhanced integration with AI. So beyond simple prompts, the LLM, you can provide files like CDIS specifications, code snippets, and dataset examples, and then provide back an answer based on what you actually directly provided. So these are task-specific processes. The LLM can analyze and provide files analyze from the provided files and perform complex tasks like modifying existing code or applying sophisticated data transformations. An example of this would be, let's say you update a data set to LLM to generate code, and ask it to generate code to clean it. Specifically, let's say you have a date variable that's a free text field and dates were entered in a bunch of different ways. You can pass that data set into the LLM and ask it to find all the unique iterations of date and to provide code that can convert all of those to ISO 8601 format. So the benefits, this approach allows for more precise and context-aware outputs tailored to the specific needs of the task. And by leveraging files and inputs, the LLM can give you a more understanding of the context or provide more understanding of the context and the content that was provided to it. Now, to automate the overall process, LLMs are great. They're efficient and with simple tasks and have limitations on complex processes. A retrieval augmented generation model, so a RAG model, it combines LLM with retrieval system to pull relevant data, enhancing accuracy. So if we think of LLMs as being a huge library that's been trained on every single book ever created, a RAG model would be that same library, but you're specifying a very short aisle that you want your answers responded back from. AI agents are little code snippets that can automate specific tasks like metadata evaluation or code adjustments based off of what their inputs are from the overall RAG model and other agents. So a comparison of the three LLMs, best for generating code prompts from a ChatGPT chatbot type of perspective. RAG models improve that output by retrieving context that you are predefined. So if you have SOPs or specific coding specifications that you want to be able to use, you can load all that information, industry standards, into the RAG model so that you know that the answer is aligned with all your preset determinations. AI agents can execute specialized autonomous tasks, so those are all being spread out. You can have hundreds of agents within a given model and all producing little tasks. They can be calling the LLMs through APIs, or they can be calling other agents as needed. So to fully automate a workflow, we can integrate RAG models with AI agents to process SDTM code generation from a fully automated standpoint. So from metadata evaluation to protocol ingestion to code customization based off of differences, all that can be completely automated through the RAG models and AI agents. Since AI agents are the core of this overall process, I'll give a more specific example of how these work. This one here is a simple AI agent written in Python. And what this one is doing specifically, it is evaluating the metadata that we're passing into it for the current EDC build. So if we have a build for a new study, we can compare that build to a previously trained on build, identify the differences, and then update everything downstream as necessary. What this AI agent, or the top of this, is doing is evaluating what the current EDC metadata is for date variables, comparing it to the old one, make sure that the formats are the same. If they're not the same, it will evaluate how they're different so that it knows how to update the code downstream. And we are working currently on a model that fully automates the SCTM process from given inputs. We have a little video here of the process at work. What this is showing is what our current model does right now. This is in alpha, so this is still being worked on and trained, is we are able to define what model to use, if it's the DVCR standard or if we have sponsor-specific, since we are a CRO. The base template that we're using, so it's going to use the templates from a SAD study so that it kind of knows what the overall programs are going to be. And then we're passing in the protocol, the metadata for the database build schema, and then also the ACRF. And what it's going to do is going to ingest those items that we're passing in. So that's the protocol, the metadata, and the ACRF, tokenizes it, and then compares the data from whatever we pass in to the pre-existing templates. As you saw it, it was creating the SAS code, running the SAS code, and then evaluating the logs of the SAS code. And on every iteration that it creates, so it created the SAS code, runs it, and then there's a specific agent that checks the logs to make sure that there's no log errors. If there were any log errors, it actually reevaluates the code, updates the code, and reruns it to the point that it's either the code is clean or it meets a certain number of iterations. Right now it's capped at 4 iterations. If it can't resolve it within 4, it will just spit it out as an error, and then we have to evaluate that. That's part of the training process. So the broader impact of AI-driven automation is streamlining data processing, automating back-end processes like SCTM, ATOM, TLF generation, expedites the entire clinical research pipeline. So the reduction, which reduces the time to market, faster data processing and analysis directly shortens drug development timelines, accelerating the delivery of new medications to patients. Enhancing accuracy and compliance, AI ensures consistent adherence to industry standards like CDISC, reducing the risk of delays due to compliance issues. In conclusion, by leveraging AI to expedite back-end processes, we not only enhance the efficiency of clinical research, but also contribute to the greater good by delivering essential medications to those in need more rapidly. The power of smart, faster data is one of the trademarks of clinical or of DVCR, and it's not only because we want to use a tagline, just because we use EDCs and paperless studies and all the things that we do. It's because at Dr. Vince Clinical Research, we know what the impact is of these trials. The faster that we can get these trials to market, the faster the people that have chronic diseases and need the drugs will be able to get them. And leveraging AI is going to be one of the tools that we're going to be able to do that, to reduce the overall timelines, because you can't think of it as just reducing a couple of weeks from one study. You have to think about it as the compound issue or the compound adherence. If you use it for every single study in an overall portfolio, you could have a drug to market months or even years in advance, because you're reducing it compounds on itself on every single study.
Thanks, Tony. Really interesting presentation and some incredibly advanced work you're doing. Let me ask, what challenges arise when you're training a system that must handle significant variation in the input data throughout the process?
Yeah, it's training a system that deals with a ton of variation is both time-consuming and complex. The complexity arises from the need to accurately comprehend protocol and database specifications, generate the appropriate code, and then ensure the industry compliance, such as adherence to CDISC standards. To address these challenges, the system employs a reinforcement learning through human feedback approach. So RLFHF is what it's referred to in the industry. So for example, if we're generating an SCTM trial domain like TA, the system might not correctly create variables like T-branch or epoch due to the vague definition of the protocol, or sometimes the protocol defines those things in graphics, so it might not have a hard time producing them. This issue only addresses by identifying errors. So annotating corrections directly from the human feedback allows the system to generate specifications, and then the feedback itself, it retrains the program. So next time around, it will be able to be more efficient. In addition to the human reinforced model, it also does dynamic interactive learning. So every time that it has like a log error that you saw in the video that we produced, it's actually recording those and being able to learn from those. So that way it doesn't make them same mistake from a coding perspective multiple times.
Okay, and so for the technical people in the audience, what benefits do standard programs provide in generating SDTM data sets? And, how does the dynamic modification by the system contribute to the consistency and, the CDIS compliance?
So standard programs provide a huge benefit in generating AI data sets by offering a consistent and validated code base to start from. Once we have the core programs in place, we know that the core programs themselves are CDIS compliant and are validated. So anything downstream that doesn't change is really validated by inclusion. So by the system itself being able to evaluate what the differences are in protocols and metadata, it is only needing to change the aspects of that program that are affected by the change in the protocol and metadata. So it's not having to do anything from scratch, it's modifying an existing code, so you're kind of guiding it further downstream, which the result is a more consistent product, reduced development timelines, and then a streamlined path to meeting industry standards.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tony, for those insights. So let's move on to Dr. Rudo, who will dive a little bit deeper into how these AI tools are applied in clinical trials. Dr. Rudo?
Okay, great. Well, as Heath said, my name is Todd Rudo. I'm the Chief Medical Officer for Clario. First off, thanks to Dr. Vince and the Fierce Group for the invitation to join this panel. Thanks to all of you, our attendees, for dialing in today. I'm always thrilled for the chance to speak on this topic, not just because it's a chance to talk about some really cool technologies, and technologies, by the way, that genuinely can move the needle in terms of clinical trial data quality, but because it gives me a chance to dispel some myths or concerns about AI bias and hallucinations and discuss some of the potential risks that AI can introduce. So with that in mind, what I really want to get to today are our principles of responsible use of AI. But for context, quickly, I just need to set the stage with these first two slides on current state. So for those not familiar, Clario is a digital endpoint solutions company. Our core offerings are centralized collection and analysis of all digital data types. So medical imaging data, cardiac data, such as ECGs and echoes, respiratory data, meaning spirometry or eCOA, and patient-reported outcome data, all those digital data types. And across these offerings, we currently have 73 different AI models that we've independently developed. And I'll give you a few examples on the next slide, just so you have an idea of what I'm talking about here. Nearly 40 of them are already deployed in about 800 ongoing studies that we're supporting in one way or another. Why am I sharing these metrics? It's really to illustrate the point that what I'm about to talk about today is not future state. There's significant implementation already underway, and really the framework that I'm presenting in terms of the responsible use of AI is what's behind all of that. So jump onto some examples here. At a high level, our focus has really been in three different domains: AI to maximize clinical trial data quality, AI to enhance operational efficiency, and AI to support the protection of patient privacy. And in the first panel on the left, I'll start with a few examples focused on quality of data. So tools that check an image when it's uploaded to the platform to confirm that the region of interest, the entire region of interest, has been uploaded, or automatically assessing images for presence of motion artifact, which can be a common source for uninterpretable or missing data. There's tools that will verify an image that was just uploaded is in fact from the correct subject, not just looking at the subject ID, but actually looking at prior images from that same subject and doing an automated assessment to say, yeah, this is somebody different that we're looking at here. To clarify, these tools that I just described, they're developed or deployed, I should say, right at the trial site and run their checks at the time of upload of that imaging data. And why that matters is that's the opportunity that actually you can make a difference. So rather than a QC process that may pick this up days or weeks later, there's an opportunity for the site to correct the issue, that missing data, and not lead to a missing data point in the data set. There's examples with ECG quality, with spirometry that I could get into, but also I'll just highlight here the privacy tools. So some of these are particularly slick, automated frame-by-frame redaction of video images that we receive, or even blurring of the face in a cross-sectional brain image. So a brain MRI, for example, could be reconstructed to show a patient's face, and we now have a tool to blur that. On the operational efficiency side of things, which is in the right panel there, just one example to highlight is tools that the radiologist would be using when they're evaluating images. And actually the tool runs before the radiologist opens the image, and we'll do some pre-evaluation, auto-labeling the dimensions of a tumor, for example, based on prior time points and what had previously been annotated, and then setting this up for the radiologist to subsequently read. This promotes efficiency, of course, but it also promotes consistency from one time point to another, because the algorithm is taking the same approach, and therefore the precision of data is improved as a result. With the time constraints today, I don't want to go into too much more detail with specific examples, because really, as I said, what I wanted to talk about is the principles behind the development of these tools and this concept of responsible use. So what you see on the screen here are our 5 responsible use principles, and these are a framework to guide us in how we develop and deploy AI. It matters so much because of the nature of the data we're working with. Patient data, treatment response data, safety data, regulatory submission data. These are high stakes scenarios, and obviously we have to get it right. And so if you've read anything about AI, you're probably aware of this concept of hallucinations and the risk for bias in AI algorithms. This is a scenario where AI is trying to give an answer to a question that it doesn't actually have everything it needs to answer that question correctly. So rather than say, I don't know, it just takes kind of best guess. But you don't want AI taking a guess as to what dose of insulin to give, or you don't want AI making a bad call when determining if cancer has progressed, in a patient. So imagine a scenario where a tumor is getting smaller. It's responding to treatment. But as the tumor is shrinking, there's some swelling or fluid edema that's developed around that tumor. When you measure that on an MRI, a human can distinguish fluid from tumor. But if that AI tool was only trained with drug types that don't lead to edema, it may have never faced this scenario. And so it's going to measure potentially the entire tumor plus the fluid around that tumor and give an incorrect response that the tumor has grown. It leads us to this framework and the principles we've developed to prevent scenarios like that, starting with the bottom left, the concept of mitigating risk. There's a few points to make, but the key here is incorporation of human oversight. In high-risk scenarios like the one I just described, where patient data is being managed, human oversight is critical. An experienced radiologist will quickly pick up that the AI tool has incorrectly measured and adjusted as needed, and subsequently we can even retrain the tool to have that capability. But with human oversight, you can drastically minimize any risk of AI bias or hallucination affecting clinical trial data quality. The other mitigation strategy, though, is simply having an understanding of how a model was developed, how it was trained and validated, and then ensuring when you're deploying that tool that it aligns with what it was trained for. And that brings me to the next principle on the top left there, which is minimizing bias. Human oversight can catch the hallucinations, as I just described. But ideally, we would simply not have these mistakes in the first place, and that bias is not inherent in the algorithm that creates that mistake. An AI training data set is generally selected by an R&D team to teach the model a set of inputs and results and learn the relationship between those two. And once it's learned the relationship between them, when receiving a new input, it can produce the correct output. Pretty clear. Bias can result if the AI training data set was too limited for the intended use. So the data set may have been felt to be complete at the time that the tool was being developed, but then when the end user asks the algorithm a question that's beyond how it was trained, it potentially gets it wrong. Okay, so that's a very abstract explanation. Let me give you an example of bias that I think is a little more concrete. Consider an algorithm that is being developed to recognize one of the most common ECG quality issues that we see in clinical trials, and that's limb lead reversal, right arm and left arm reversal. So the staff picks up the lead that's indicated as RA, right arm. They pick it up with their right hand, and instead of crossing the patient's body to put it on the appropriate limb, it's done incorrectly. It's applied to the left limb instead. If we train a model with 100,000 ECGs, 1,000 of which have limb lead reversal, the tool's going to be quite good at identifying what the distinguishing features are for lead reversal. But what if we then ask it to evaluate an ECG from a 2-year-old? And it was only trained on adult ECGs. You can see where I'm going here. It's going to potentially get it wrong and either overcall or undercall the presence of lead reversal. We built a great tool, but we didn't deploy it responsibly because it was biased to perform well in adults only. And then we deployed it in a pediatric study. And while that's an example of a training data set lacking a range of ages, you can imagine the same thing with gender or ethnicity or race, or perhaps even body mass index, where all of the subjects in a training data set had normal BMI, and now we're applying it in an obesity study. So it's not that every training data set needs to be always fully inclusive, but it's recognition of what data went into the training and ensuring that the use cases for the algorithm match. And that's what this principle is all about, this minimizing bias principle. It's really the critical point at which the R&D teams and the medical and scientific stakeholders need to collaborate in order to understand the training and use, intended use. That takes us to the third principle, ensuring accountability, which is in the top right there. The key to understanding this is it's not just about the title of a tool or algorithm and that telling the whole story of what that tool does. Using my example from before, if we just trust that an AI algorithm for detecting arm lead reversal it does exactly that, we would have no way to know it was actually only trained on adults, and it's actually an adult arm lead reversal algorithm. The ensuring accountability principle is all about this. It's the transparency beyond just the name of the tool, but sharing with the end user, which is the site or the sponsor or maybe an internal stakeholder, sharing with them how it was developed, what are the training elements and validation elements, and what's the intended use and therefore potential limitations. And then the last two remaining principles involve an understanding of regulatory landscape and also privacy rights. So regulatory authorities, of course, have a vested interest here. You may be familiar with the EU AI Act, which was just passed this summer and will start enforcement in the next 12 to 24 months. This sensibly takes a risk-based approach, and so it assigns 4 categories of risk to determine what level of risk mitigation measures need to be implemented. The inclusion of human oversight is a core element there. The FDA has stated essentially that they do have a vested interest in any use of AI that can potentially affect study data integrity. They're less interested in for example, an internal efficiency AI algorithm, and therefore, aren't exerting domain over that. And then privacy rights is the last element here. So I'll be brief, but essentially the principle here is ensuring that data that's going into the development and training of these models is fully anonymized. It's aggregated in such a way that nothing is identifiable back to any single subjects, any study sponsor, any particular study, fully anonymized and aggregated to protect the privacy of the subjects within the data set. And then in the remaining minutes here, I just want to talk about diversity for a moment. And I mentioned when discussing bias in AI algorithms, the importance of diversity in that training data set. But let's take a step back and touch on diversity in study populations first. So this is a major area of industry discussion right now, sponsor interest, regulatory interest. And so just a few quick points to make here. Most importantly is the understanding that diversity in clinical trials is much more than just an issue of equity and inclusion. That's a piece of it, of course, and ensuring equal access to studies matters. But at least as important is the fact that we can't assume that to understand how a drug will behave, particularly in terms of safety and efficacy, if it's never been studied in a particular population. And so there's a great example on the efficacy side of things with hypertension, high blood pressure drug development. When you looked at today's guidelines for selecting a first-line therapy for high blood pressure, and there's a dozen or so different drug classes to choose from, the first question in that guidelines is, what's the patient's race? And that's because Black patients are more likely to respond initially to calcium channel blockers and diuretics versus white patients who are more likely to initially respond to ACE inhibitors. But how do we know this? It's because of large studies that enrolled a diverse population. Back in 2002, there was a publication called the ALLHAT study. I think it was about 30,000 subjects, and about a third of them were Black. And so otherwise, if we didn't have this data and we used studies that predominantly enrolled white patients, we would assume ACE inhibitors are the best drug for everyone and not see the right efficacy that we could, or the optimal efficacy if the right drug is selected. The safety example, also quite powerful. So Black women represent about 3% of clinical trial participants in breast cancer studies. Yet Black women are 41% more likely to die from breast cancer. They have a higher risk of recurrent breast cancer, and they have a higher rate of triple-negative breast cancer, which is the most severe and treatment-resistant type. So part of this difference in outcomes is definitely explained by a difference in access to screening and definitive care. But the concern that is flagged, of course, is does the disease itself actually behave differently in Black patients? So how could we learn if there is some difference if we didn't sufficiently study the population? In 2017, there was a study that was published, finally sufficiently powered to look at this. It had about 400 Black women in the study of about 2,000, so 20% of the trial population. And it was discovered there that Black patients were more likely to develop a serious side effect from their cancer treatments. And specifically, it was a side effect that required the dose to be reduced. Well, not surprisingly, if you're reducing the dose the patients are receiving, the efficacy of that drug is going to go down as well. But if only 3% of the trial population is a particular race, you won't have enough data to recognize this, this important difference. So I'll stop here, but just to reiterate why I included this bit on diversity, today is the principle is directly applicable to diversity in AI training data sets as well. If you study a narrow population, as I said, your study results are really only applicable to that narrow population. If you don't responsibly curate a diverse AI training data set, and again, this isn't just about racial and ethnic diversity, it's potentially also age and BMI and renal function and things like this. If you don't have a diverse AI training data set, your AI model will potentially underperform when applied in a different population. So understanding how an AI model was trained, what was the intended use of the developers when it was created, that's the key here to minimizing risk. Heath, I'll turn back to you.
Fascinating presentation, quite cutting edge. I'm curious how receptive the sponsors you've worked with have been to the inclusion of AI in their clinical trials. Are there some uses they've been more reluctant for than others?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we've seen an interesting mix, and actually I'll call it an evolving mix of positions from the different sponsors that we work with. The majority have been enthusiastic, interested to learn more about how AI could be leveraged in their programs and obviously be an advantage to their programs. Their interest does align with those 3 different domains that I mentioned earlier. So efficiencies, what can we do to help accelerate the study? Startup, for example, or data quality. So, what can be done from a quality standpoint to prevent missing data or improve the precision of data? Interest in privacy, redaction of PII as well. Uniformly, though, they do express a desire to maintain some appropriate level of human oversight. It's a reasonable request, and it's aligned with how we're doing things. There are a minority of sponsors, however, that have sort of, I'll call it a higher level of concern and have launched dedicated processes for vetting the use of AI on any of their programs. They're asking all the questions that I mentioned before, questions about how an algorithm was developed and trained, how was it validated? They want visibility to the validation test results. Again, aligned with our transparency principles, not an issue, but I think it shows that sponsors are becoming pretty savvy to understand benefits, but also risks of AI and asking the right questions along the way.
Yeah, I agree with that. Your comments about diversity in training data sets for AI and diversity in clinical trials in general is quite interesting. Is there a specific goal or goals for diversity in training data sets that developers should work towards? And if I can follow up with that, how many records from different race and ethnic groups, for example, is enough to be confident in the performance of the algorithm?
Yeah, so another good question. So first, the trial population should reflect the epidemiology of disease. That's the key. There's no set percentage of female or Black patients, that should be enrolled in every study sort of uniformly as a target. It's really about the disease. Autoimmune diseases, higher prevalence in females. Lupus, higher prevalence in Black females, right? Your population needs to reflect the disease rather than having a specific target. When thinking about AI training data sets, the real question is, how's the algorithm going to be used? And in this case, on what population will it be used? And if the tool is going to be used in a particular, let's say a population of elderly, obese patients with diabetes and kidney disease, then training the algorithm on a population of healthy volunteers and middle-aged patients with hypertension is going to be problematic, right? So it's understanding the end use and then tailoring the training to reflect that. And then, just the last point, I guess, to reiterate, the validation of the algorithm, so not just the development, the validation, that data set should also reflect the same population in which, you intend to use the tool.
Great points, Todd, and I'm excited to see how this develops into the future. Now let's shift our focus over to Beth Williams, who will delve into how AI is being leveraged for project management and operational excellence in clinical trials. Beth, welcome. Over to you.
Hello, my name is Beth Williams, and I'm the Executive Director of Clinical Trial Services at Dr. Vince Clinical Research. I'll provide a brief presentation on how the DVCR project management team is embracing and integrating AI into our everyday activities. I'll kick things off by summarizing just a few examples of the challenges faced by project managers where AI-powered solutions could be implemented to minimize or remove some of those obstacles. The first being the complexity of study designs. We're all seeing the increasing complexity of clinical research protocols and the strict regulatory requirements associated with them. This can lead to difficulties in ensuring compliance and consistency, both with internal processes and clinical research sites. Traditional project management processes often include manual tracking of compliance. This manual tracking can be error-prone, time-consuming, which could increase the risk of protocol deviations and/or regulatory issues. Data sources. Clinical trials generate a vast amount of data from various sources, including electronic health records, lab results, and patient surveys. Integrating and managing this data effectively is a major challenge. Traditional data management systems may struggle with integrating heterogeneous data sources, leading to data silos and inefficiencies in data analysis. Resource allocation. Managing resources and budgets for clinical trials is complex, with many variables to consider, including personnel, equipment, and funding. The traditional approaches to budgeting and resource allocation may lack precision and flexibility, leading to potential over or under allocation of your resources. Risk management. Clinical trials are inherently risky, with potential for unexpected issues like adverse events, protocol deviations, or delays. Traditional approaches to risk management often rely on reactive rather than proactive strategies. This makes it increasingly difficult to anticipate and mitigate risks effectively. And then last, I'll note that coordinating activities amongst multiple stakeholders, including clinical staff, sponsors, regulatory bodies, and functional leads, is always challenging. Traditional approaches often occur through fragmented communication channels, which may lead to delays, misunderstandings, or inefficiencies. So incorporating AI and innovative technologies into project management can address the limitations of those traditional approaches. And it can significantly enhance the efficiency, effectiveness, and overall project outcomes. Specifically, efficiency. So we know that AI and machine learning can automate repetitive tasks, streamline workflows, and reduce administrative burden. This allows our project managers to focus on more strategic aspects of clinical research. Advanced data integration. AI-driven data integration platforms can handle complex data sets from multiple sources, providing us with real-time insights and enabling more effective data analysis and decision making. Automated monitoring systems can provide real-time updates and generate accurate reports, improving oversight and reducing the risk of errors. AI can optimize resource allocation through predictive modeling and real-time analysis. This improves budget management and ensures our resources are used effectively. Advanced analytics can also anticipate potential risks, providing early warnings, allowing for proactive risk management and mitigation strategies. AI and machine learning models can adapt to changing conditions and interim results. This allows for more flexible and responsive project managers. And then lastly, AI-powered collaboration tools and virtual assistants can enhance communication, track progress automatically, and ensure all the stakeholders are aligned and kept informed. AI implementation can seem daunting, but even incremental or limited use of AI can have a significant impact on your project management team. To prove this point, I'll showcase some of the examples of AI technologies being utilized by project managers today at Dr. Vince Clinical Research. So the first one is a simple example where our project managers are using AI to leverage the more sophisticated features of everyday applications. One example is the use of AI to help employees create complex Excel formulas or even write or modify macros. The development of these formulas or macros can inject automation into manual daily tasks. So in the top example here, we used AI to provide a suggested sum-if formula within Microsoft Excel. This was used for daily resource allocation calculations for a department manager. In the bottom example, you'll see an AI-provided macros programming script, which allowed team members to combine data extracts into an Excel workbook and apply automated formatting to the combined output. And then we were able to share that macros with the rest of the team for use. Another example is that many companies have AI-enabled options already available to them within existing applications. Performing a bit of research about the AI-powered features within your existing applications can allow your teams to leverage those features to enhance those daily activities. One example that we use is transcription and translation features that are included in many of the virtual meeting platforms. The transcription feature can be used for compiling meeting minutes, and the translation feature allows us to support communication and collaboration with team members in different countries. There's also additional options that will auto-summarize and provide those summaries to attendees following the meetings, which is very powerful. Many companies are going a step further and choosing to implement AI-powered platforms to support their daily work. These platforms are easy to set up and use, often having guided tutorials throughout the process so that users can follow along each step of the way. The platforms simplify how data is viewed and summarized. To go a little bit further within those AI-powered platforms, they will allow project managers to provide detailed project timelines within a collaboratively managed space. The powerful features include automated notifications, which can be set up to ensure task owners maintain their timelines and provide routine status updates to the project manager. The timeline data can be integrated into other systems or platforms to avoid redundant data entry across various platforms. These features allow for a significant reduction in timeline management burden for project managers. Timelines can also be summarized into dashboards and rolled up into management summaries. This allows managers to view resource allocation across tasks and projects. Teams can use summary features to support project and workload discussions, ensuring projects remain on time and within budget. These AI-powered platforms can also be leveraged to collect, store, and summarize survey responses. Whether you want to collect external site feasibility responses or plan your next team building event, these platforms allow for easy and effective collection and analysis of the required data. It's evident that integrating AI-powered tools into clinical project management can greatly enhance efficiency, but implementing these solutions comes with their own set of challenges. Here's a list of just a few of the best practices to consider when selecting and implementing your new AI-powered platform. First, make sure you have clear objectives. Identify what specific challenges or inefficiency the AI tool is intended to address. And make sure you have measurable goals for what you want to achieve with that AI integration. When selecting the AI tool, make sure the tool aligns with your project's needs and objectives. And make sure you're considering factors like functionality, scalability, and ease of use. You're going to want to make sure the vendor associated with that tool has a strong track record, evidence of regulatory compliance, and is willing to provide adequate support during and after system implementation. And very importantly, make sure that that AI tool can integrate smoothly with the existing systems and databases your team are currently using. Always, always, always consider data privacy, quality, and regulatory compliance. Ensure the use of the AI tool complies with regulations and other relevant industry standards. Your company must continue to maintain high standards of data quality, as AI tools rely on the accuracy of that data to function effectively. Throughout this process, you're going to need to provide comprehensive training for team members on how to use the AI tools effectively. You'll need to set in place a structure to offer continuous learning resources and support so that the users stay updated on the best practices and new features. There'll need to be a process for continuously monitoring the AI performance to ensure they're meeting those set objectives. And then you'll always have to continue to gather feedback from users to identify areas of improvement and make necessary adjustments. There are also a lot of challenges to overcome when implementing AI-powered tools. In the limited time I'll only cover a few of them. One of the big ones is data privacy and security concerns. Handling and protecting sensitive patient data can be challenging, especially with the stringent regulations we operate within. AI systems can be vulnerable to cyber attacks, making robust security measures essential. Navigating complex regulations governing the use of AI can be difficult and time-consuming. As a result, obtaining regulatory approval tools can be lengthy and an uncertain process. AI tools face many challenges integrating with legacy systems or existing software. So ensuring the seamless data flow between AI tools and other systems can be problematic if data is stored in disparate systems. These potential roadblocks need to be identified and assessed before proceeding with your implementation. Another big challenge is staff may be resistant to adopting new technologies, preferring traditional methods they are familiar with. So you'll need to make sure that your selected AI platform is scalable and flexible. Scaling AI solutions will need to accommodate growing or changing project requirements. They'll need to be adaptable to fit project-specific needs or evolving practices within your organization or the industry. You'll need to regularly assess the return on investment and the impact your AI tools have on project outcomes, and that'll help you build that case for adoption. Be prepared, though, to adjust your strategy based on the performance metrics and the changing project needs. This is going to demonstrate to your team that the platform is flexible and will grow with the company's needs. I'll also note that obviously the initial investment in AI tools and the ongoing costs of maintenance, updates, and support can be significant, a big burden for your team to take on. Implementing and managing AI tools also requires specialized skills and resources. The project management team at DVCR has benefited from the company's commitment to innovation and technology. So we were well funded and resourced to implement the selected AI tools we wanted to proceed with. You'll need to make sure you have that similar buy-in from your team before you start that implementation journey. Two more points. I'll note that AI tools can experience technical failures. Any computerized system can. So you'll want to make sure that your computerized system validation addresses these potential disruptions and that you have contingency plans that are robust. And then make sure you have you've implemented a structured approach for change management, keeping all stakeholders informed about the benefits and the changes associated with the evolution of those AI-powered tools. That's all for me. I'll hand it back to you, Heath.
Beth, thanks so much for that valuable presentation. Could you provide examples of successful AI tool implementations in clinical research?
Absolutely. Two of the items that come to mind would be our EDC platforms. So we're seeing more and more that our EDC platforms are able to integrate through use of AI features. And this allows us to streamline the data capture and really leverage some of that real-time data validation, error detection, and anomaly reporting. This, of course, supports not only data management, but the rest of the functional teams in reducing time spent on manual data checks and improving data accuracy. Another example I'll mention is Smartsheet. We at Dr. Vince Clinical Research have been successful in implementing Smartsheet to support our project management team. Smartsheet offers project management capabilities with AI-driven automation and analytics. So it's allowed us to really automate task assignments, monitor project progress, and analyze project data at a portfolio level to make sure that we've got the right resources allocated and that the health of the project is where we expect it to be. That's all I got for that one.
Yeah, and you touched on security. So that's always be very, very important. What measures should be in place to protect sensitive data from potential, AI-related security breaches?
Yeah, protecting sensitive data in clinical research requires a comprehensive approach. There's a lot of facets to it. So I'll just touch upon a couple of the high incident ones. So you want to make sure your data is encrypted and stored on databases and file systems that have robust standards that will ensure that unauthorized access does not occur. You'll want to implement role-based access controls to restrict data access based on user roles and responsibilities. And you'll have to have the training to support that as well. You'll want, obviously, to, as I had mentioned, regularly back up data and store your backups securely, ensuring that those backup systems are also encrypted and protected from unauthorized use. And then, as always, consistently referring back to the relevant regulations and standards to ensure that the current data protection laws apply to your AI-powered platform.
Thank you, Beth. To round out our discussions, we'll turn to Dr. Vishwa Kollaru to share his perspective. Dr. Kollaru.
Heath, thank you so much for having me, and Dr. Vince as well for their valued partnership. I'm really excited to add my views on how we are accelerating drug development with AI and my experience from the trenches, initially as an early employee at Recursion, and now building and scaling Enveda. Without further ado, let me dive in. My talk today will have two main sections. One, just the role of AI in drug discovery and development. How do we think about the framework of AI companies and how AI can make a difference? And the second is a very quick spotlight on how we use AI at Enveda and how we're setting a new bar for productivity. The core problem in drug discovery is actually quite simple. It's that things that work in the lab don't work in people. And it's that probability of success number that we see as low as 10% for clinical candidates and even lower than 0.1% on that very right that actually drives the left two numbers, which is the inordinate amount of time and money that it takes for us to develop one new medicine to FDA approval today. And while these point estimates in and of themselves are actually quite concerning, what is perhaps even more concerning is the fact that this trend towards these numbers has been consistently one that has gone against us. Since the 1960s, when the FDA tightened regulations around thalidomide, the industry has seen declining productivity to the tune of doubling the cost that it takes to deliver just one new medicine every 9 years. And this observation is called the Eroom's law, which actually stands in stark contrast and literal opposition to the Moore's law, which is an observation that suggests that every 2 years, the number of transistors that can be placed on an integrated circuit can double. What is notable is that this trend has not been reversed even by the advent of the entire biotechnology industry or by things like precision medicine. So our bet, of course, as an industry, and which is what a lot of us here are for, is to assume and hope that artificial intelligence can actually reverse this trend. So how do we think about AI in general and all the ways in which it can play to help us reverse the Eroom's law and make better medicines faster? I think the first and most important observation is that all AI drug discovery platforms are ultimately hypothesis generation engines. What they produce is a prediction, and turning that prediction into reality still involves a large amount of work that is, by definition, outside the realm of prediction and involves, perhaps in many cases, most of the steps that are not automatable or in some way or form done by robots. So I think that's an important thing to understand, is that AI isn't a magic bullet for things to happen in the physical world, but rather a hypothesis generation engine that perhaps drives better outcomes in terms of probability of success and therefore time and money. So what are these hypotheses and how do they actually fit into the scope of drug discovery and development as a whole? The first is that AI can help us drug the right kind of biology. There are many theses today that ultimately point to the lack of new and interesting targets that ultimately lead to translational success as a bottleneck. And so AI can help us understand which biology to drug. And this typically involves integrating large amounts of biological data sets in order to predict the ones that will most likely move the needle in the case of a disease. The second is to drug that biology, whether with a small molecule or gene therapy or oligonucleotide, in a modality agnostic manner, identifying the best candidate to actually perturb that biology that was identified in that first step. Once you have these two things, you actually have a drug candidate, and now identifying the right population that was most likely going to benefit from this drug candidate is sort of the third bucket. So right biology, right modality and molecule, and right patient population. Across these three buckets, there's been a massive explosion of companies over the last decade or so. And companies that have started in one domain have expanded to the other and vice versa. And this has led to a rich pipeline of companies that are trying to apply the predictive power of artificial intelligence based on different data sets at different stages of new biology, new molecule or modality, and new translation. We'll double click on a couple of these companies over the next 2 minutes before transitioning to Enveda. The first of these, and perhaps one of the earliest, was my alma mater and the place that I started my career, which is Recursion Pharmaceuticals. Recursion at the core is and was a new biology engine. They've done a lot of work to expand their abilities beyond predicting new biology, including the recent merger and acquisition of Exscientia, which of course will lead the industry in exciting directions. But at its core, Recursion does the equivalent of facial recognition, but for cells. And this representation of new biology and large data sets that drive these representations of new biology are the core of their engine, upon which the entire Recursion operating system, which allows you to take those biological hypotheses and derive drug candidates, sits upon it. So therefore, the first assets that Recursion actually developed were not net new chemical entities. And perhaps this is something that folks get wrong about these assets coming from the Recursion platform. Early on, Recursion was not a new modality or new molecule platform. They were a new biology platform where they identified the best biology to drug for a particular disease condition. And if that could be addressed with existing molecules, that actually adds to the efficiency of the whole process. Recursion, however, has now transitioned to creating new chemical entities and has pursued an aggressive strategy of both internal development and external landmark partnerships with large pharma companies. Now, moving out of the small molecule modality and perhaps into biologics, but also the second bucket of my classification is a company called Generate Biomedicines. And Generate is in the process and business of using artificial intelligence to create new biologics and new protein therapeutics using multimodal AI technologies that allow them to go through the iterative loop of creating a biologic much faster. Generate also has a mixed strategy of pursuing internal programs as well as partnerships. And they are also, just like Recursion, waiting for multiple readouts over the next 18 to 24 months. So what is the one key thing, or maybe the three key things that you need to care about for AI and drug discovery? And that's data, data, and data. Specifically, data availability. AI algorithms are only as good as the data that they train on. And in many cases, for many of the small intermediate steps in new biology, new molecule, and new translational hypotheses, there are lots of problems for which high quality, consistent data sets are just not available. And if you take the amalgamation of existing data sets, usually they actually fail in the realm of data quality, because artificial intelligence will learn itself the easiest way to actually perform the prediction that you care about. And a great example I like to share here is early on, the Department of Defense tried to train machine learning algorithms to predict the kind of tank that was shown in the picture or a surveillance image. And the artificial intelligence system just learned whether it was night or day, because a particular kind of tank images were always shot in the dusk, whereas others were shot in the dawn. And this is a big failure mode, which leads all companies that are really serious about artificial intelligence to invest deeply in data quality. Last but not the least is data complexity or relevance. How do you represent this data for artificial intelligence systems, and or does this data actually represent the complexity of the biology you hope to model ultimately in vivo, such that you can drive that improvement in probability of success? So at Enveda, we actually straddle the first two buckets, and we have a large amount of data moat that we've already created and data that we have collected in order to solve our problem. What is the core thesis of the company? It's actually really simple. We use artificial intelligence to unlock simultaneously the most validated yet untapped idea in modern drug discovery. While it's commonly known that a large proportion, somewhere between a third and half of all FDA-approved small molecules owe their origin to a metabolite discovered in the natural world, it is not known that all of these drugs come from just 300,000 odd compounds, which is less than 0.1% of the natural world. And why is it that we think this is important? It's because, quite simply, every single one of these molecules was honed by billions of years of evolution and was made in a cell, by a cell, and for a cell. I won't belabor this figure too much, but we recently published a peer-reviewed paper showing that across 8,000 molecules that entered phase 1, if a molecule resembled one that looked like it was forged by Mother Nature, it had nearly a 50% greater chance of working in the clinic. So if it is validated, historically relevant, and has key intuitive advantages that are bearing out to rigorous analysis, why have we not been able to access this chemistry? And the simple answer is that when you take a natural sample, you have no idea what the molecules are and what they do. And answering these questions used to take a tremendous amount of time and money. So at Enveda, we use transformer models on metabolomics or mass spectrometry data to essentially do to chemistry what AlphaFold did to protein folding, and be able to identify what these molecules are without needing to purify them. Therefore, our platform, for the first time in history, brings the entire natural world into modern drug discovery workflows without any loss of latency. And this technology has actually allowed us to build a landmark pipeline, apart from landing what we believe is one of the only off-balance sheet investments from Microsoft as a leading private biotech company. So the proof, of course, in biotech is in the pipeline. And in less than 5 years, we have developed 16 preclinical programs, about 10 of which will graduate to development candidate status by the end of the year, and are completing our IND-enabling campaigns for our lead 3 assets. Our pipeline is deep and broad across I&I fibrosis, neurosensory, and metabolic disease, across new biology as well as new chemistry. And all of this was built at rates of success and speed that is significantly faster than industry average. For example, allowing us to access new and privileged complex chemistry and be able to identify interesting molecules that are different than the rest of the chemical substrate used by the industry, meant that using AI, we could unlock a lead that would graduate to a development candidate significantly faster, about 30 to 45% faster than the industry average. So taking a step back, what do we think about the future of AI in drug discovery and development? One, that there is significant value to be unlocked, even with minor improvements in success rates at different steps along the way, with, of course, the big unlock coming when one of these hypotheses, either alone or together, yields a step function improvement in the number of drugs that we can make. Unlike traditional drug discovery, AI systems need to learn from both success and failure modes for each individual prediction that they make. And the key to being able to do this is to have an active lab-in-the-loop system that both generates high-quality data as well as actively corrects the machine learning and artificial intelligence systems when they make a mistake. I believe that's my time, and that's my last slide. Thank you.
It's a great presentation, truly fascinating. Thanks for sharing that. Question for you. Are there any steps in the drug discovery and development process that are unlikely to benefit from AI?
That is a great question. We believe that the right framework to think about that is more that different steps along the way will benefit to different degrees from artificial intelligence systems. And I think there are two kinds of problems. One, that where there's a large amount of data available and where a solution has already presented itself. For example, the problem of protein folding and AlphaFold has essentially followed closely on the heels of a large amount of data. The second is when such data is actually quite difficult to collect and has either not been solved or may not be available to be solved. For example, identifying out-of-domain interactions between the diversity of the entire chemical world and every possible interaction with a protein binding pocket is one that we all like to think we've made a lot of progress on, but I think some recent work has shown that that is not in fact the case. So that is one where maybe there's a little bit more work to be done. I'll add in one more element, which is typically interesting, which is not whether AI can improve, but whether that improvement is meaningful. For example, in the case of medicinal chemistry, our algorithms, as well as all of the others, have shown that, a medicinal chemist is perhaps quite good, and therefore, even if AI starts making a significant contribution, it would need to be much, much better than the best chemists in the world in order to make a difference to the drug discovery and development flow scheme. So that would be sort of how we think about it. And I'm sure that over the coming years, we'll improve and refine various aspects of that answer.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what are the biggest hurdles when building an AI-enabled versus traditional biotech?
I think the first is an emphasis on data. I think traditionally, drug discovery is a series of sequential steps, and you want to get to the right positive answer as quickly as possible, but reframing that to try and generate as much positive and negative answers and data points as possible, not just within your program, but across the entire effort of your company. Perhaps that's one big shift that I've seen from both a logistic perspective as well as a philosophical perspective tends to become a barrier. The second one is associated with that philosophical barrier, which is the culture of actually getting drug discovery experts that have a lot of historical knowledge and context, working hand in hand with the culture of modern technology companies and AI, as well as data science practitioners, such that the best of both worlds can ultimately be harnessed. And on top of that, perhaps sort of bringing it all together is the willingness and ability to embrace what the industry views as risky and being open to new ideas. Because ultimately, by definition, outlier value comes from unexpected places. And if we keep doing what we have been doing because we consider that best practice, I don't think AI or any other technology will help move the needle.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Colero. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So we are out of time, and any questions that you have submitted, we'll do our best to get back to you. So thank you for all of those. And also thank you for attending this Fierce Life Sciences webinar and submitting all those questions. I'd like to thank our speakers for participating and Dr. Vince Clinical Research for sponsoring today's webinar. Don't forget, a recorded version of this webinar will be available to you to access within 24 hours using the same audience link that was sent to you earlier. Thank you again for joining, and we look forward to seeing you at future events.